Hello, beautiful people. So we're back with an update on The Love is Blind Season 5, episodes 5 to 7. And sure, lots to say. I think one of the most important things to address here is I hear one of the most overused words now in modern society outside of narcissism, narcissist, of course, is toxic. So I thought just to ground ourselves before we actually start to look at the recap of what happened in these episodes is to revisit the term toxic and a toxic relationship, to be more precise. A toxic relationship in general is a relationship that has unhealthy dynamics that causes one or either party to feel distressed. Some of these unhealthy dynamics can include being disrespected, being manipulated, and of course, being emotionally or mentally abused. Now, all relationships aren't perfect. I think we all know this. And there can be moments in your relationship where you or your partner cannot act as the best version of yourself. But of course, what defines toxicity if those patterns are repeated. They are repetitive, they harm the other party, and they don't show signs of abating or ceasing. The journey of understanding your own personality and your own way of relating and communicating your emotions to other people is a very long one. In fact, it's lifelong. We're constantly changing as human beings. So without getting too deep on the psychology part, I just wanted us to revisit what toxic means, because often on these streets, I'm seeing a lot of people define, sometimes inappropriately, what toxic means. But I can definitely say one thing. Episodes 5 to 7 had a lot of very interesting indications that some of our cast members may be engaging consciously or unconsciously in toxic behavior. Whether it's with previous relationships or current ones, it was very interesting to see this time around what was going on. Let's start with obviously one of the most talked about scenes in the last 3 episodes, the JP Taylor breakup. Definitely one that had a lot of question marks. One of the things I was really intrigued was like, what kind of a man is JP? I don't feel that the show can show us much about people's actual personalities because that takes a large chunk of TV time, and we'd have to obviously understand a lot of context. But there were some concerning things in JP's style of communication to Taylor, but in terms of his awareness of another person's emotions, his awareness of another person's reception of his words. There just seemed to be a disconnect there. And that's as respectful as I can keep it, because, I mean, we all saw the reasons he gave her for not bonding since they left the pods. We saw his reaction or lack thereof to seeing her in distress. Almost his dismissive tone of trying to minimize things every time they're addressing a conflict or a discord. He had this tendency of kind of, we'll get over it, it's small things, we'll be fine, instead of actually talking things out. So what was really interesting about that relationship, pretty much the writing was on the wall, at least on Taylor's side, and understandably so. I think as flawed as we can all be as individuals, a relationship can't really sustain itself if the two partners involved aren't able to crack the communication code. That's just facts. Another very interesting relationship to then discuss, or dynamic to discuss, is Izzy and Stacey. Really interesting to watch the whole meet the family scene or bunch of scenes. It brought about a very interesting topic about when you come from 2 different economic backgrounds and how to mesh lifestyles. I think that was very, very interesting for me, as I think this is the first time probably Love is Blind has dared to venture to discuss the financial differences. between couples and kind of go into such a detailed discussion without leading the discussion for us as the viewers. You could smell the difference, so to speak, right? I think in Izzy's defense, he walked into this relationship, and I'm presuming so. He walked into the relationship obviously looking first for connection and for the discussions about meshing each other's worlds as a secondary discussion. Stacey, on the other hand, kind of is not really now giving some reassurance on what was her intention coming into the pods. She's obviously used to a certain kind of guy. That's obvious. So the question I kept having was, why enter Love is Blind if you still, unfortunately, would tend to revert to those expectations? You know, a process like this is also meant to help you face your own patterns and dynamics. That's not to say you should not aim to be in a relationship where being provided for is one of your priorities. If that's your big thing, you go ahead and own that. I think my question mark with how it's rolled out is more about at what point could she have communicated the things about lifestyle, not just meshing, but it sounds like she wants definitely a partner whose lifestyle is exactly like hers. And she's kind of almost coming across like she's imposing her lifestyle on Izzy. And there's not enough footage we're getting on her inquiring about his lifestyle and what he'd like to see happen in the relationship. So that imbalance is going to play itself out one way or the other. And let's see what happens in the upcoming episodes. I do want to give a shout out to Stacey's dad. He had some really low-key humor in how he was trying to just low-key let Izzy know, like, you're going to have to keep up here. And I love the joke that a lot of YouTubers are saying, like, he's going to probably give Izzy a job to help him out. But I have a very interesting devil's advocate question that I'm still going to ask you guys. If you come from different backgrounds with your partner, what conversation should you be having about meeting your respective lifestyles halfway? What does it look like to mesh your lifestyles together? And I think that's the big discussion here. Is we can talk ad nauseum about how we're never going to make the same money in a relationship, we might not come together. And there was a recent big hoorah about Tyler Perry's words about what in particular he believes black women should concede, for lack of a better term. I don't want to paraphrase anybody here, but I think the conversation of money, we can all agree, is a big thing in all relationships. So what does it look like for you when you find out your partner isn't on the same economic bracket? What does a fair meshing of worlds look like? Who pays for what? There are many successful couples and marriages out there, and I'm looking forward to input mostly from a lot of you. The last thing I want to discuss is this Uche conversation. Man, there's not much to say. I actually realized initially I was going to give it a lot of airtime. Then I thought, no, I think everybody's kind of run that conversation to the ground. What does remain here is, I think both Aaliyah and him have a lot of work to do on themselves. That's not to say that they're not deserving of being in healthy relationships right now, or even long-term relationships right now. But I think some of the conversation tones, perception, self-awareness was just so problematic. In Uche's discussions with Aaliyah, Uche's discussion with Lydia, Uche's discussion with Johnny, there was just things there where you were just like, what's going on? With Milton, sorry, not Johnny, with Milton. I really love the fact that the show is showing a lot of relationship dynamics that are currently actually happening in society right now. Sure, there's a whole conversation of cloud chasing and the TV thing, and people aren't really serious. But still, if you really examine the show beyond that, you start to see some interesting relationship dynamics that you might need to think on. So let me know what your thoughts are. I really think that the surprise factor for me is just how well Milton and Lydia are currently getting along. Hopefully that doesn't change. We will see. I just can't wait for the season to actually reach its conclusion. I think we should definitely be looking forward to season 6. And there are variations of the show that can actually be done where we see some therapists come in early on the show. I think it's in dire need of therapeutic people to come and add some very grounding work with all the contestants. Other than that, really loved it. Let's see what happens next.